Hi, and welcome to the Little Fireface Podcast by the Little Fireface Project. My name is Kylie, and I'll be your host and guide to all things SlowLoris. As you probably know, this is the very first episode of the Little Fireface Podcast. What you may not know, however, is that today is also the first day of SlowLoris Outreach Week, also known as SLOW. SlowLoris Outreach Week celebrates all things loris and paro to bring worldwide attention to the plight of these creatures. To kick off SLOW and start this podcast, I talked to Queen Fireface herself, Professor Nekaris, about her work with SlowLorises, her role as director of the Little Fireface Project, and the moments that keep her going. Let's take a listen.
Usually you ask me my name and my title.
Yes, that's a good way to start.
My name is Anna Nekaris, and I'm professor in primate conservation and anthropology at Oxford Brookes University, and I'm director of the Little Fireface Project.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what the Little Fireface Project is and what you do?
The Little Fireface Project started in 2011 to formally study SlowLorises throughout Asia, as well as to work with local people and people worldwide for education about the plight of SlowLorises and empowerment of local communities and governments to change laws regarding protecting SlowLorises.
So you're one of the foremost SlowLoris conservationists and researchers in the world. Could you talk a little bit about why you're so dedicated to protecting SlowLorises and why you think they're so important?
So I started studying lorises in the early 90s, and one of the reasons I chose lorises is because they're really interesting, and I was surprised even then that nobody had studied them. So I started learning a lot about their behavior and ecology, and almost everything slow and slender lorises do is weird and wonderful and interesting. Yet at the same time, they're really cute primates. They're considered very cute, or they're considered to be important in rituals and medicine. So they're one of the most traded protected primates. But because they're small and nocturnal, they never attract the same attention as large charismatic animals like tigers and elephants and chimpanzees. So I think they're a really good representative of a number of small or nocturnal or cryptic animals that are facing extinction crises, but they're ignored because they don't meet the public criteria of like a flagship species.
So I think that's kind of what we're doing this week in talking about SlowLorises and raising awareness during SlowLoris Outreach Week, is trying to raise them in the public eye and just get people to care about SlowLorises. So could you talk a little bit about how Slow Week began and some of your goals for this Outreach Week?
So SlowLoris Outreach Week began in around 8 years ago when I started formally the Little Fireface Project, and I started doing a lot of work on social media and different social media platforms, because SlowLorises in particular, as opposed to slender lorises or podos, are heavily exploited on the internet, on YouTube videos, memes, Instagram. There are photo props on tourist beaches and places like Turkey and Thailand. And again, it's perceived, because they're so common, that they must not be threatened and that it's okay to have them, that those videos are very, very cute, and it makes people want to have them as pets. A lot of the pet trade for SlowLorises is actually domestic. So there's a huge pet trade in countries where they occur, like Indonesia or China or Thailand. But there's also a huge export market to places like Korea, Japan, Poland, Russia, Czech Republic. And although it may not be so much in the country where I'm living now, which is the UK, the prevalence of the pet trade is still one of the major threats to SlowLorises. So using the internet and trying to turn people's ideas from them being a cute pet, I try to use SlowLoris Outreach Week as a platform to get loris projects around the world, including rescue centers and zoos, to band together to promote the fact that they are wild animals and are highly endangered.
So I think that those are really wonderful goals. And hopefully this outreach week and even, listening to this podcast, people start to realize how special the SlowLoris is and start to really care about them in a meaningful way. And so I'm hoping that you can share with us some of the challenges of working with these animals and running the Little Fireface Project, being the director, as well as some of your greatest success stories. I think when we talk about science and research, we just think of people in lab coats and in labs taking little test tubes and doing their little studies, when I think that there's so much more that goes into it and so many opportunities for failure and opportunities to learn and grow as a scientist than just running tests all the time, which is what I think a lot of people think that scientists do. So could you talk about some of your greatest challenges and your greatest successes in this area?
Running a long-term field project is extremely challenging, and I think nobody understands how difficult it is to find long-term funding for a project, people who are committed to stay on a project for more than 1 year or a few months, especially anyone academically minded, because they tend not want to live in the range countries where animals occur. I don't really understand why that's the case. And at the same time, again, working with a non-charismatic species, with a little brown nocturnal species, it doesn't attract the funding. It's harder to get, no matter how wonderful your data are and no matter how many years you collect data, you will still get a better paper in a better journal with one sample size of a chimpanzee than 10,000 samples of a SlowLoris. So you don't get the same media outreach, you don't get the same even scientific recognition for the work because of the nature of the species. So those are all huge challenges. I would say one of the huge successes, however, is that we have gone into our 8th year. It's the first ever study of a nocturnal primate continuously studied at night. The only similar study is of night monkeys, where there's a continuous population studied, but they study them in the day. So to actually get people committed for 8 years, we have a great team in Indonesia. They've been with us since the beginning, and those guys are out every single night with the SlowLorises. And we have some great funders such as People's Trust for Endangered Species, the Cleveland Zoo and Zoo Society, and Disney Worldwide Conservation Fund that are funding the project every year now for the last few years, and some of those since the very beginning, as well as a number of zoos. We're an important project of the Persimmon Taxon Advisory Group of Europe, and a number of zoos in Europe that keep SlowLorises, such as Sheldon Wildlife Trust, Paradise Wildlife Park, Nature Zoo Rhine. They are supporting the project every year. Augsburg Zoo has been with us since the beginning, and there are other small zoos who come and go, and we can't do it without zoos as well. So I think the other great thing is that the zoos have learned from supporting the project how to care for lorises better in captivity. Their breeding is getting better in captivity, and we've revolutionized the diet of SlowLorises in captivity. So those are all pluses from working with that community of small but dedicated funders. And that's interesting is SlowLoris Outreach Week officially starts this year.
At this point, Anna's dogs decided to jump into the room and take part in the interview.
SlowLoris Outreach Week officially starts this year on the 14th of October, but the week before, on the 8th of October, it was announced that I think for the 6th time in a row, Javan SlowLorises appear on the list of the world's 25 most endangered primates. So we have a double kind of press release in October to make the public aware that the problem isn't going away, pet trade isn't going away, traditional medicine trade isn't going away. And the more it happens, this is eventually when these species will go extinct. We have to realize that it's not only about protecting habitats, it's protecting human greed and selfishness. So hopefully these two outreach events together are going to make a difference.
So as people are listening to this and hopefully developing their own sense of awareness and care for this little brown nocturnal primate, who I think is quite charismatic, even if the general public might not agree, what can they do to start to develop and promote SlowLoris conservation in their own lives during SlowLoris Outreach Week, but also beyond?
People can make a huge difference to SlowLorises in their daily lives in simple ways. One is to just be very careful about the material they share on social media, whether it's a SlowLoris or another exotic species as like an animal selfie, or if they see a wild, cute meme or video, they should question the integrity of that video or whether they should like it or share it. And in fact, maybe they can report it or leave comments for the uploader to remove the video. Normally, the social media sites won't remove it themselves, so it's pressure on the uploader to remove it is one of the main things that works. Also, it's very easy to say it, but in our daily lives, living more simply, eating a more plant-based diet, reducing your use of palm oil or using sustainable palm oil, using sustainable woods, all of those things actually really help with climate change and forest loss, which are going to be one of the other major threats to all species, including SlowLorises.
So we're reaching the end of our time together, and we've learned a lot about your work with the Little Fireface Project and your research with SlowLorises, and hopefully listeners are starting to really understand what it's like as a SlowLoris researcher and why they should really be passionate about SlowLorises like we are. But I was hoping, Dr. Nekaris, that you could share some stories about just about your time with SlowLorises. So you've worked with them for so long, you must have seen some really incredible things. So could you tell us about some of those?
It's interesting when you watch SlowLorises and SlenderLorises in the wild for so many years. Now, for me, it's been almost 25 years. So that I've seen lots of amazing things, but I can still be surprised. And I think the most when you finally know all the individuals in your population and you realize that they're related to each other and they live in big family groups. I think in the past when people saw SlowLorises or SlenderLorises together, they thought maybe they were just solitary animals coming together, but now we know it's mother, father, and up to 3 babies. It's sometimes even 4 offspring, and feeding together in one tree, playing together, wrestling with each other. And so we have a number of instances where recently we actually found a very small baby in a home range next to this other family, and we just assumed it was the baby of that family. But then we stumbled upon the next tree, and there were 5 of them together with the tiny baby in one tree. So it was evident the neighbors also had a baby, and all of these other guys were just playing together. And when you see, again, a SlowLoris as a pet living on its own, when you see them in zoos where cages may be too small so they fight on their own, and then you see them in the wild in this adorable, extremely social family group, it really gives you a different perspective on those animals. And for me, that's been amazing, knowing who they all are and knowing that they're related and seeing how they learn from each other. I would just like to encourage everyone to check out our website at www.nocturama.org, where we have a huge number of materials you can download, including storybooks, education packs, memes, photographs of animals in the wild. We've just launched an entire series of YouTube videos of the entire ethogram, which is all the behaviors SlowLorises do, and SlenderLorises actually. So that could be used for zookeepers, students doing projects, rescue centers, people doing reintroductions who want to know if the behavior of their animals are normal. And we hope that that series of videos and photographs will be really helpful.
Thank you so much for listening to the very first episode of the Little Fireface podcast. This week, we're premiering one episode every day in honor of SlowLoris Outreach Week, so stay tuned. To learn more about the Little Fireface Project, check out www.nocturama.org and find us on social media. We are at Little Fireface on Twitter and Instagram, and Little Fireface Project on Facebook. To show off your own SlowLoris pride and let us know what you think of the Little Fireface podcast, use the hashtag SLOW2019. The Little Fireface podcast is hosted and produced by me, Kylie Sorensen, with special thanks to Professor Anna Nekaris.